All right, greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna Israel, Solonomics 101. First, I said 8 o'clock, but then I wasn't finished. Then I said 9 o'clock. Then I said I didn't want to get started too late, because I don't know how this is going to go. For those who just joined us, welcome to the discussion. We're going to take a little trip down memory lane, not too far from where we started from. However, we're going to take, let me put on the thing off here. We're going to take a little trip down memory lane. So I'm going to give some people some time to come in. Usually, some people come in and say they missed it. This is ADOS, defined, redefined, and undefined. Logical fallacies or not. Okay, this is what I named it. Initially, this is not what I was going to talk about tonight. I was actually going to come and share some scenes from the, hold on one second, because they starting early. Hold on one second. All right, all right, all right. We're going to give y'all some time to come on in. If not, you can catch this on the replay, right? So this is not what I was going to talk about tonight. I was going to talk about the melanated population in the Caribbean War. I was going to talk about, not the Caribbean War, in the Revolutionary War. I was going to talk about Black loyalists and that information. But I received a message that it kind of got me interested in changing the topic a little bit. Still going to do a little ADOS homework, but we're going to change the topic a little bit. Define, redefine, and undefined. Like I was saying, just to rewind, about 2 or so weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, I was asked a question. I didn't know what that necessary terminology was. From there, I began to research and look it up. You can see the progress of the discussion here on the channel, where at first I was giving my first impression of the ADOS movement. And then as I began to do the research, I found more and more things coming up. Now I'm going to play a clip, and I'm going to play it a number of times throughout the night so that we can frame this. I've never played the clip before. I have just spoken to what I have heard, but I'm going to frame this conversation so we can understand how it's progressing and why we need to come to terms with some of the things, whatever side you fall on. I haven't come here on all of these discussions to necessarily bang on people, but misinformation, I've made it or disinformation, I've made it plain and clear throughout my discussions here that misinformation is the problem. If we're intentionally misinforming people, that's problematic, right? And so ADOS, to my understanding, is a movement that's seeking designation that's based on history. So one would have to say that this movement needs to be historically accurate. And the people who are supporting the movement needs to be historically literate, okay? Goes for all of us. If you're supporting something, then we're going to need the very basics, the very thing that it's built upon is history. And so if we're making claims about history that are not so, we can't move the goalposts when now those claims are not supported by the things we said, because at that time we didn't know. That's disingenuous. I'm going to talk about a list of logical fallacies in a minute. But to kick it off, I'm going to play this. This is one of the founders, according to the website, and we're going to go to the website as well to make sure that I'm not putting any words in anyone's mouth, okay? There's a lot of things that have been said on the topic, and I did go initially to those who were speaking about it to hear their thoughts. So this is Yvette Carnell, thoughts in 60 seconds, okay? This was recently done in 60 seconds. I can't play it from my computer, so I'm going to play it from the other computer. And don't worry if you come in a little late, because I'm going to play it again, okay?
Ain't nobody been around here judging her blackness. What we have judged is her lineage and her attachment to American descendants of slaves. She has a Jamaican parent and an Indian parent, and neither of those parents is an American DOS. Descendants of chattel slavery in this country.
Wait, hold on for 1 second, because it's a little bit far. I'm going to bring the other computer closer, and I'm rewinding. So this is her clipping her own commentary in 30 seconds. It says 60 seconds, and it's from someone named Jamil Smith. I guess this is what, Twitter? The person says, I look forward to evaluating Kamala as a presidential candidate, not judging her blackness or right to call herself an American. Those matters were both settled in the affirmative long ago, and the people questioning either are wasting our time. Nothing to add, it says. Okay, so this is what it says, and this is her response. So I'm going to play the response. Oh, come on.
We have judged her lineage. We did that. Ain't nobody been around here is judging her blackness. What we have judged is her lineage and her attachment to American descendants of slaves. She has a Jamaican parent and an Indian parent, and neither of those parents is an American DOS, descendant of chattel slavery in this country. Not everywhere slavery. We know there was slavery in other parts of the world. But if you're in the Caribbean or one of those places, if you're in Haiti, then your issue, as we've said here many a time, is with the French. And if you ever get reparations from the French, I will clap, I will be happy, I will throw you a party, I will buy you a drink, baby, but I will not try to take your money. I will not try to eat that fruit, because I don't have no bones buried in Haiti. My bones is buried in here. I celebrate you, I will help you, but I understand that that is yours, and I think you understand that too. So the real issue is, just like I'm not Jamaican, just like I'm not Haitian, just like I'm not Eritrean, you are not American DOS. You do not have parents and grandparents who grew up on sharecropper farms who can trace their stuff back to slavery. You do not have that. So what that means is that you are not a part of this tribe. That don't mean you are not black. It means you are not a part of this tribe.
Okay, that's 30 seconds. All right, that's the 60 seconds. I'm gonna rewind it, but because there were a lot said right there. Hold on 1 second. Now I'm over here trying to work with two computers and they're bugging out.
Nobody did that. Ain't nobody been around here judging her blackness. What we have judged is her lineage and her attachment to American descendants of slaves. She has a Jamaican parent and an Indian parent, and neither of those parents is an American DOS, descendant of chattel slavery in this country. Not everywhere slavery. We know that was slavery in other parts of the world.
Okay, so just so that I'm understanding what I'm hearing, and I'm going to comment now that I let it play straight through, the things that I've been answering to, or the history that I've been bringing, it's not even my personal opinion. The reason I've been going to share this history is because of one of the logical fallacies that I'm going to point out tonight, which is faulty generalization. At one point, she's speaking directly to Kamala Harris's situation, and then she switches over. It falls under hasty generalization and faulty generalization. She's speaking directly to Kamala Harris and then goes to contrast and compare mainland chattel slavery to the slavery that has been out throughout the diaspora, okay? And then she's going to make some assertions. So let's listen to the assertions. This is what I've been answering, but you know, for the sake of time and all of that stuff, we're gonna take a listen here.
But if you're in the Caribbean or one of those places, if you're in Haiti, then your issue, as we've said here many a times, is with the French. And if you ever get reparations from the French, I will clap.
Okay, here is the assumption. And this is why we saw the other day about those who are in, you're talking about who can trace their lineage. That's what I thought. One parent who can, or one person who can trace their lineage back to one person who was in chattel slavery in America. That means under that description, if you can do that, then you would be under what this quote ADOS banner is. So the assumption is that if you are in the Caribbean islands, then your descendants' bones are not buried here, or you did not fight here. As we're finding out with this research, that's a hasty generalization that is unfounded by history. But let's continue.
I will be happy. I will throw you a party. I will buy you a drink, baby. But I will not try to take your money. I will not try to eat that fruit. Because I don't have no bones buried in Haiti. My bones is buried in here. I celebrate.
For those who said that, I'm wondering why you keep saying the bag. I've heard the bag mentioned a lot of times. It wasn't talking about, I will not try to take your emotional and spiritual redemption. I will not try to take those. It's referencing money. Oftentimes I hear her reference money. Others reference the bag. Some people have told me cut the check. And so if I say something concerning the bag and the fact that it's a movement, the founders have called it a movement. And they have also talked about cutting checks and the bag. So let's continue.
I will help you, but I understand that that is yours, and I think you understand that too. So the real issue is, just like I'm not Jamaican, just like I'm not Haitian, just like I'm not Eritrean, you are not American DOS.
Okay, there goes another faulty, hasty generalization. Again, as I'm saying, as we're doing the research, to what degree, and I'm going to see, particularly on my page, what some people have said once the information and the research started to come forward, how the goalpost, which is another logical fallacy of moving the goalpost, how the goalpost begins to move when the facts begin to come out. So when we come to discussion, all I've been saying is let's be intellectually and historically honest to the best of our ability, right? So I'm going to continue.
You do not have parents and grandparents who grew up on sharecropper farms who can trace their stuff back to slavery. You do not have that.
Okay, again, another hasty generalization. How do you know that all the people that fall in the category of those coming from the diaspora do not have that? How do you know that those who were in the Revolutionary War, who were in chattel slavery in America, who got their freedom because they ran away from their masters and they fought for the British, the Redcoats, who were promised to be liberated, who went to not Soviet Union, who went to Nova Scotia, who went to Sierra Leone, who went back to the Caribbean. How are we saying this when historically we see that there was a migration even during the time of slavery when people were continually enslaved? I'll continue. This is what I'm answering. I'm not answering wrestling anybody's bag from their hand. All I'm saying as someone who's been doing the Left Project is that we, the people, do not have an, for the most part, not all, but many of us, based on these comments and the way in which we make these videos and we interface, we really don't have a handle on what actually happened. But I'm going to continue.
What that means is that you are not a part of this tribe. That don't mean you are not black. It means you are not a part of this tribe.
Okay, so that's the 60 seconds. I'll play it again for those who just joined us. But okay, so that gives the context, this framing this discussion on why Amuna is going through, and I haven't moved from that point. I'm not going to anywhere else to do anything else. I haven't moved from this particular point. The assertion, because that's what it is, that melanated people in the Caribbean, number one, did not sweat. I've been saying this from the beginning. Bones are not buried, and did not fight for the rights that are received in this country. That I'm pushing back on that and saying that that is historically inaccurate. That's number one. Number two, the thought that, again, now that the people who are coming for the Caribbean are leeches, and the people who are coming for the Caribbean are just coming to take and mainland continent, but right now making a case for what is being said about the Caribbean is nearest onto the mainland continent. So those who are saying that ADOS who never, because the thought is, the way you paint the picture is that those who never left and who have always been here are the only ones who contributed to the building of this country, to the fighting in the wars, to the building of the country, to the sweat, the tears, and the burial of bones. That's not true. That's all I've been saying this whole time. That's not true. And not only am I saying that's not true and getting emotional, each and every time you see me do one of these ADOS homework assignments, is to bring you facts so that you can go search about it for yourself. Like I said, I really don't have a dog in the fight as it relates to um you know, who is going to get what. That's not the reason why I'm doing this. This is not the reason why I've been covering this matter, even when it wasn't in vogue. That's not my reasoning or my rationale. But let's go over to some of the comments now. That the feedback, each time I get feedback or see something that needs to be addressed in this particular vein, because I'm going to stay in this vein right here until we can be honest to a certain degree, or until I feel satisfied enough to say there's enough information out here that we don't have to keep repeating this lie. You see what I'm saying? Maybe we need to go to something else, but this particular one has been. So the first one that I addressed was the very one that was given, which is this recent study about the color of wealth. And in the study, the article that was presented was spun. I spoke about that. In the study, you're talking about Caribbean presence in Miami, helping to build the very infrastructure of Miami. And once I saw that, I'm like, why are you slanting the information if you have a valid claim? There's no need to slant it, present it as it is. There's no need to, for lack of a better word, color it so that it looks the way we want it to look. Okay, cool. So the first video, and I'm excited because this is an opportunity to discuss respectfully, right? When I brought this up, because remember, when this goes out, I'm being told and I'm seeing that go check this out. This is the article that you need to see. This is where it's at. This proves everything that's being said. Okay. I go over there, I read it because, reading is fundamental. Reading is fundamental. And I'm going to come and, reading is fundamental. I'm going to come and read the comment section in a second. On this first one, I was told, after proving that the assertion was incorrect based on the evidence, Someone says to me, Dr. Reuven says, sorry, sister, if Caribbean immigrants have been in the US for 100 years, most, here we go. This is a logical fallacy now, because we're not going off of what happened. We're going off of what we think should have happened. Most should have intermarried with ADOS, in which case that would make their descendants ADOS. Other than that, they're SOL until the mainland of ADOS have achieved federal protection status. So I'm like, whoa, this is moving the goalposts. First you say no one helped. Then you ask the question, how many helped? And then when you see a large number help, then you diminish that number. And then you say, well, this is what should have happened. And if that happened, then I absorbed you. Why are we doing the two-step? I had another question that I didn't come to yet about how many participated in the civil rights. Why is this sister asking that? Because there's an assertion that anytime we needed to fight against the oppressor, you wasn't there. Anytime that we was doing such and such, you never came to our aid. And so now there's all these questions of, were you really there? Did you really come to help? Are you really a leech? Because again, if one wants to go to get what is due theirs, they don't have to throw someone else under the bus to do it. This is my contention. We don't have to make other people into scapegoats to do what we need to do or say what we need to say. Let me see here. Then I had another question about Barbados, and you can see this under the video, this very same video, and whether or not this person named Our Economy, whether or not they can go to Barbados and get full tuition. They didn't provide me the link initially. I asked for the link. I got the link, I read it, and I came back with more supportive evidence that America is part of the Organization of American States, and they can go to school in the Caribbean. The University of the Caribbean, which is UWI, University of the West Indies. I showed that. That video is here, right? So there's a natural progression of this discussion that's showing that there are a lot of gray areas that people may have questions about. Another space after we left from Miami, and we see a Caribbean presence in Miami. Next thing you know, we are in South Carolina, because I made a statement and I got pushback on this statement. But like I said, most times I'm not going to come and say something that I can't back up. Now we can discuss, or you can push back on whether or not my sources are credible, but I'm not going to come saying something. I'm not personal. This is not a personal blog at this point. You see what I'm saying? And even when I do and share Solonomics information, I'm not just making stuff up. And I give you always in the link in the comment section, whatever book I'm talking about, whatever article I'm referencing. And so in this particular one, we see that Jamaica, namely, and the Caribbean at large, it is fueling the slave economy, because the same people who were owners on the mainland were connected to the Caribbean. And they were taking bodies who were enslaved under slavery and shipping them into chattel slavery. They went from one prison to a next. That is historical facts. So to say that their bodies weren't buried on both sides, that is historically inaccurate. Now, one would have to go into which families. And this is what we saw in the proto-ADOS discussion that I had. They took 26 years in that video that I showed you about the early pension movement of the actual slaves. They were actually they weren't the descendants of slaves in the early 1900s. They were actually enslaved and got free while they were children. And they came together over 300,000 strong. We read about it, last week, to ask the government, petition the government for reparations, which was essentially their pensions. They were nice onto this issue. They can go back through all of these generations, but it took time. They didn't just have a blanket statement. It took time for Callie House, which is her name, and the other man, I forgot his name right now, to canvass the South, to canvass the North, to canvass the Midwest, and all of these places to get people who were willing and could actually substantiate their claims. If one is going to come out with such a claim, then one has to be able to substantiate it by saying, I already did the research and the research shows this, right? The next one was Echoes of Africa, Forced Migration from the Caribbean. I shared that too. Like I said, the feedback that I'm getting is one that is either in denial or just denial. You know what I'm saying? Because if you begin to change the pieces on the board, what it does is confuses, okay, well, what is this really about? You see what I'm saying? Is it about saying who's not, or is it about claiming or whatever this parameter is by saying how do you qualify? So at first, let me go to ADOS 101. Yeah. At first, we heard that all you had to have was one ancestor. That's what I heard. They say, sister, go to the website. So I goes over to the website, and they're like, you just have to have one ancestor who was in chattel slavery. That's what it said. Okay. Then it does talk about Jim Crow, which again, and I have to come back and show you about the Harlem Renaissance and how many melanated bodies who were enslaved in the Caribbean actually came over here and actually were subject to Jim Crow and redlining and everything else. You see what I'm saying? Because it wasn't static. There was movement. There was movement. I don't know how much I could illustrate that just in the same way, if you were at first a slave in Virginia and you end up in Mississippi or you end up in Alabama, there was movement. It wasn't just static for everyone. And so are we saying now that if you were not, if it wasn't static and you wasn't here the whole time, then you don't qualify? If you left the country, then you don't qualify? You know what I'm saying? Even though your ancestors' bones are buried here. Let me go over to the website. I'm gonna read it shortly. It says ADOS was started by the Brain Trust, because they keep saying read it, right? Of Howard graduate and host of Breaking Ground political show, Yvette Carnell, and UCLA alumnus and attorney Antonia Moore, who hosts the weekly radio show Tone Talks. ADOS, which stands for American Descendants of Slavery, seeks to reclaim/restore the critical national character of the African American identity and experience. If that's the case, then the experience is vast. You cannot blanket that experience, because as we read the other day, there's so many different facets to that very experience. Now you're saying if you don't experience it like I experienced it, which was also the case in slavery, where you had people who were freed slaves or freed men who were never enslaved, but they were oppressed, but they have went through Jim Crow and they went through redlining. So you always have this division. It says one grounded in our group's unique lineage, and which is central to our continuing struggle for social and economic justice in the United States. I'm trying to find where it was put. It goes through all the wealth gap information, this, that, and the third. And I'm trying to find where it says who qualifies or who's ADOS, right? Why am I saying this? Because some of the conversation I'm having coming back is trying to navigate around this misinformation that was being put out there. Because you can't keep saying that if it's not true. Then you're going to have to qualify your statement. As a specific group with a specific justice claim, the ADOS movement demands a specific agenda with policy prescriptions that address the losses stemming from institution of slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, convict leasing, mass incarceration, and immigration. And then they begin to demand things. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. I'm trying to find out where it's, because what I hear next after this, it was very intriguing. I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna come do this video. Without measures being instituted, this is at the bottom of the demands, ADOS are locked out of the country our ancestors built during chattel slavery. So this would be the starting point. This is the launching point. So this is why I have been honing in on chattel slavery and who experienced chattel slavery. Because chattel slavery, before you can get to convict leasing, redlining, Jim Crow, you have to touch chattel slavery. And the contention is that people from the Caribbean did not experience chattel slavery in America. And we showed the lie detector test determined that that's not the truth. Without reforms through transformative government, we'll be left to continue living in third world life in a first world country. Okay, let me see if they took it off or if it's still here about who. I don't see it. with the one, and how many people remember the conversation about one ancestor who you can prove was enslaved? I didn't see the one ancestor. When everyone kept asking, you know, what qualifies, and it's that uh, one ancestor thing going on. I don't see that here. So if anybody remembers what a one ancestor thing in chattel slavery, let me know. So far, what have we been able to prove based on history? And this is not malicious. This is for us to be honest and intellectually honest when dealing with one another. We were able to prove that the Caribbean stocked. We're talking about 1619, those bodies came from the Caribbean. We're talking about stocking South Carolina. We're talking about stocking New York. We're talking about all throughout Virginia. We're talking about up to the mid 1700s. We see an experience of these melanated bodies coming from the Caribbean, doing double time, going from one prison to the next, deciding that they're going to rebel. We're talking about the taxes that the crown put on because they wanted to slow down the importation of so-called Negroes coming from the Caribbean. They put 30 pounds on their head tax for every business owner who wanted to buy a slave from the Caribbean. But if you brought one straight from the continent, it was 3 pounds. Why? It was to discourage the importation of Caribbean. So when we talk about the split, when we talk about the possible places in which there was a split, we have to look at how the master was looking at those who were rebelling and how they set the tone in many spaces to let you know that, hey, those ones are trouble and you were better than them. So I hear some people, and I'm going to click it again, where we're not understanding that where this tension and this friction is coming from. We have to look at the history to understand where it's coming from. There were spaces where, if you look up Comoranti Negroes, it was like the terror in the European to say these people are wild, these people are savages. You know what I'm saying? They're gonna come and mess up your whole plantation. We need more docile slaves. We need slaves that are easier to be broken. And this is coming from the ethnic groups that came from the continent and who was known to be a warrior and who was known to be more calm in spirit. These are all things that played into when you're meeting up. It's not the first time immigration, quote unquote, is not the first time that you're meeting here. It's not the first time. So as I was watching, I told y'all I got the, and I'm come to the questions. I got the Book of Negroes. So as I was watching the first disc yesterday, and I've seen it some years ago, one of the first things that popped up to me, many things, but one of the first things is by the time she gets to New York and she leaves her, she runs off from her master, Lindo, right? She goes to a tavern. And when she goes, Aminata is her name in the narrative. When she goes to the tavern owner says, hi, I'm Sam. He's melanated, okay? And I'm from Jamaica. This is in 1770s, during the time of the Revolutionary War. What is a Caribbean Black, so-called, doing in New York in the 1770s? Question. Let me come to the, let me go one more thing, and then I'm gonna come to questions. I'm gonna go to what brought us here. And I want to shout out, I believe it's a sister, for sharing her thoughts. This is Sleepy CCS, who have shared and commented before. But she comments and says, after what, 6, 7 episodes of me disproving, for those who just joined us, I'm gonna play it again. This is what I'm talking to, this is what I've been talking to, this is what I will continue to speak to until I feel satisfied from speaking to it, right? Because I'm learning as we grow, and I think this is interesting. So since we have more people, this is what I'm addressing, everyone. Let me press play again.
Ain't nobody been around here judging her blackness. What we have judged is her lineage and her attachment to American descendants of slaves. She has a Jamaican parent and an Indian parent, and neither of those parents is an American DOS. Descendants of chattel slavery in this country. Not everywhere slavery. We know that was slavery in other parts of the world. But if you're in the Caribbean or one of those places, if you're in Haiti, then your issue, as we've said here many a time, is with the French. And if you ever get reparations from the French, I will clap, I will be happy, I will throw you a party, I will buy you a drink, baby, but I will not try to take your money. I will not try to eat that fruit, because I don't have no bones buried in Haiti. My bones is buried in here. I celebrate you, I will help you, but I understand that that is yours, and I think you understand that too. So the real issue is, just like I'm not Jamaican, just like I'm not Haitian, just like I'm not Eritrean, you are not American DOS. You are not, you do not have parents and grandparents who grew up on sharecropper farms, who can trace their stuff back to slavery. You do not have that. So what that means is that you are not a part of this tribe. That don't mean you are not black. It means you are not a part of this tribe.
All right, so I played that again.
Why you did that?
Like I said, there's a lot of moving of the goalposts. We read about the Trinidadians yesterday, day before yesterday, who were among American descendants of slaves, and they did get repositioned in Trinidad for fighting with the British. And along with this logic, if we calm down and step back from the narrative a little bit, and I know it's an emotionally charged subject, if we go by the logic that where you were enslaved at, that's who you should ask for your reparations, depending on what governing power was over you, then I will submit to the listening audience that from 1619 to 1776, America was not your enslaver. I'll say that again. From 1619 to 1776, America was not your enslaver. America was under the British crown. So for that initial part of chattel slavery, do you go to Britain? Do you go to the actual business owners? Because do you go to the Dutch West Indies Company? You see what I'm saying? Did you go to the East Indian, all of these companies that were trying, like, who do you go to? Because during that initial part of the founding of America, 1619 to 1776, America is not your enslaver. America's under the crown. This is why they're fighting for their liberty to come from under the crown. I'm going to read some of the comments now. The leaders of ADOS, again, I'm reading some of the comments, have said in the past that ADOS, that they are with them, this is from A.O. Green, define who are part of it, just like Native Americans kicked out Black people that technically had strong Indian blood. They don't care what evidence is brought forth. They have the final say. This is why I say that's a logical fallacy. That's moving the goalposts. You see what I'm saying? Once you see that, oops, there's a hole right there, move the goalpost, move the goalpost, move the goalpost. That's disingenuous. You see what I'm saying? And it's not based on history. So if we're going to base stuff on history, the history that we have available to us, then let's do that. Haru says one of the leaders of ADOS is not ADOS herself. That's interesting. ADOS is entrenched in logical fallacies, not to mention the major issue of not even defining what a Black person is, leaving room for racial. I can't with you. Dolezal and Sean Kings to claim ADOS. Yes, this is what some of the pushback has been, and some people see it as being haters. When you present something like this and it's not anchored to a certain degree on all sides, yes, you will have loopholes that people can jump through. It says they will only deflect from points you're making. It's a bandwagon fake consciousness movement, and that's sad if that's the case. Karen Bell says, true. All we got to do is get in tune. This ADOS is a great apparatus. Is that King Rob? Yeah, I mean, it's a discussion. I think it's an excellent opportunity to do what we're doing now. It's one that has gotten the attention of many people on all sides, and I agree. It's a great opportunity to have a discussion, but hopefully the discussion is centered around truth and real restoration, right? And not necessarily throwing other people under the bus or making up things that make us feel good and soothe our issues and our pain and our hurt, because this is a lot of what I'm hearing, and not really dealing with the truth of the matter. Dave says, I'm both ADOS and Pan-African, but I'm opposed to Black immigrants who come to America and disrespect African Americans by calling us Akata and other derogatory terms. We're going to come back to that statement, Dave, because again, this is something that individually and collectively, we can definitely make some headway on. This is something that we, the people, are responsible for actually getting to the crux of it. I would say that in reading, and I was trying to find which book it was, but in reading one of the narratives of a woman who was a professor and wanted to go back to Ghana to do some studies on the slave trade and the history, she found that, and this is also on the continent, that being a slave or being a descendant of a slave is a position that's relegated to the lower rung of society. It shows that you have been conquered, or that you have been basically conquered, right? And this is the light or shadow that it casts on people. It's kind of like if the bird or the animal goes out into society and humans come in contact with it, the actual group of animals or the mother of the animal, say a baby bird, may reject that animal because of the contact that it has had with a species that it's not either recognized or agreeable with. So we have to look at all of the psychology that's behind what's going on. It's not to say whether or not it's right or wrong. It's the psychology behind, even though one would look back and say, hey, I came from you. You see what I'm saying? And I am you and you are me. There's a psychology there. There's guilt there. There's indifference there. There's resentment there. There's all of these things that are balled up into the way in which people deal with themselves. That, and it's not only the case from those who are mainland continental Africans who come here. It's also the case if you leave the Caribbean. If you leave the Caribbean and try to go back, you are that baby bird that went out the nest. You see what I'm saying? You're not always accepted back by your own people. You are relegated to lower than and less than because now you have been tainted by America or England or foreign in general is what they call it. So this issue that we're talking about seems to be, it transcends just the disrespect that happens here, not to diminish it, but it's a mentality that many people hold to be able to define who's authentic and who's not. Right. And so that's something I would think that we could, if you want to come on the other side of the screen and participate in a panel discussion, let me know and we can talk about that. I had an opportunity one time. I was invited to a Caribbean space. It was, I forgot what it was, to address the crowd, in a poem or some type of art form. And I spoke on that. I spoke on my experience of being born here from people from the Caribbean and how people from the Caribbean look at you, reject you, or accept you. And this is something real. So I definitely can understand the feelings that come along with that type of behavior. Person K, good to attend as usual, sister. 100% pro-African, especially our Caribbean and continental African family. ADOS is indeed an insidious, no doubt, white. What's this? Back diversity tactic. I mean, there's many things we have to look at. There's many things we have to look at. I don't astonished. I'm gonna call you astonished because I don't want to mess up the first part. Nah, America took on the debt and we fought in their Revolutionary War, but we don't hear of things often. I wanted to talk about that tonight, actually. You know what I'm saying? But then I got a little bit pulled over to this side because I keep hearing some stuff. But melanated bodies fought on both sides of the Revolutionary War. You have melanated bodies who fought for the rebels and melanated bodies who were Black loyalists, who fought for the British. Who fought for the British. And so this is something, and they actually fought here, some died here, and some of their ancestors, like we saw, they went to other colonies, like Sierra Leone, like Liberia, like the Caribbean, like Nova Scotia. This is history. How do we say, oh yeah, because you didn't stay here, then you didn't struggle all the way, then you are not a whole body ADOS? Come on. That's discounting other people's experience because you wanted them to be in the same jail as you for the same length of time. And because they got bailed out earlier, now you don't qualify. There's a danger to that. In the rewriting of history in that way. ADOS thrives on an ahistorical rhetoric. I agree. Fortunately, you, through the LEV project and your teachings, reveal truth. These ADOS type through incomplete analysis on their part deny. And Person Kid has been here since we've been doing the LEV project, what, 2-3 years ago? When many people weren't even interested in hearing about this stuff. And I'm wondering how much the bag has brought the attention to the suffering and the pain of those who came before. Is it authentic or is it centered around the bag? Do we really want to know? Or are we just trying to see who's not going to get this bag? Baruti says, Amuna, you are doing a great job in showing that within the U.S. space as a slave colony, Africans were imported from many African nations and sold between many Caribbean islands. Thank you so much. That's all I'm trying to show in the beginning part of this pushback narrative, is that we cannot just assume that Caribbean was the Caribbean and it didn't move from the Caribbean. It's called the British Caribbean Islands. That's why I say from 1619 to 1776, all of this was the Americas. This is history. We have to go into it if we're going to base a claim, or if you're going to base a claim, whoever's going to base a claim, you're making a historical claim, but don't want to hear about history. That to me, I don't know. I don't know. If you're making a historical claim, you have to want to be historically accurate to the best of your ability. Um, okay, so then I get this message from Sleepy CCS, which I think is moving the goalpost. You let me know what you think. So there was a natural progression each way, a step along the way. I shared my thoughts and my proof and the information for you to read for yourself. And then I get this. I need Solonomics to come to grips with this new paradigm that ADOS are promoting. I need to come to grips. It is not based on a Pan-African framework. How is this Pan-African? The only thing I've been showing is those who were enslaved in the Americas and those who were enslaved in the Caribbean were often enslaved in both locales because they were both under the British. That's not Pan-Africanism right there. That's just showing you who was your captor. I'll continue. And therefore, it's unsettling for some people. These people will come to accept it in time. What's unsettling for me is like person kid said, an ahistorical viewpoint. What's upsetting for me is not being honest with the literature and giving the people who are going to support you the information that they need to actually go out and have these discussions as informed citizens, right? ADOS, she puts equals USA DOS. Again, it's changed. Do we see that? Well, at one moment, it was American descendants of slaves, which is this the Americas. And then now it's specifically United States ADOS, which there was no United States of America at that point. So you see what I'm saying? This is, if you go back in history, it's like watching a slave mode movie and then seeing Harriet Tubman on a cell phone. You're going to be like, wait a minute, there were no cell phones in slavery, Harriet Tubman. What are you doing with a cell phone? So when you study history and you see USA DOS, you're like, there was no USA at the time that your foreparents were in chattel slavery. I'll continue. The early part, let me say that. USA DOS, because now it's changed. Black people in the United States that are descendants of chattel. So now you have to physically be here in the United States and not just be a descendant. That are descendants of USA chattel slavery, whose families were in the US for all. This is the moving of the goalposts. Now, you had to have been here for all of the following: chattel slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, and Jim Crow segregation. At first, you just needed one ancestor in slavery. How many people out there have heard that the first criteria was that all you needed was one ancestor in slavery? Please, somebody help me out. Now you had to be here for all. So this is again moving up the goalposts. You had to be here for chattel slavery. Why? Because now it's being shown that that assertion, the initial assertion, I'll play it again if I need to, was incorrect. So now it's being changed to chattel slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, and Jim Crow segregation. If someone's family was not in the US for all of the events listed below, they need to file a separate justice claim with the USA government. They are not included in ADOS restorative justice claim. Now, their families have not experienced the accrued financial harm and disenfranchisement that ADOS have in the USA. So, from what I'm getting, I don't know if this was an approved analysis or the update, because I don't see this particular breakdown on the website. But this is now, you have to fit all of the criteria. First it was one, now it's all, because now it's showing that Caribbean people, or so-called Caribbean people, it's just people enslaved in the Caribbean, was here earlier. So now it's like, oh, now you have to be here for everything. Their families, as it says, the U.S. has a caste system that places the Black families that lived through all of the 4 events listed above at the bottom of its caste system. ADOS are a separate group from all of these people that Solonomics is discussing. All I'm sharing is that chattel slavery, the people who experienced it, whose bones are buried here, who the leader said, the founder, one of the founders was discussing. That's what she said. What makes her have an ADOS claim is because her foreparents worked here and died here, and bones are buried here, right? So that's what I'm using. No one is claiming that these groups have not suffered. What groups? The ones who were enslaved in slavery in America? Or that they do not have a justice claim against the US? Now, hear this. They need to file a separate justice claim for the restorative justice claim that ADOS is filing. I just found that, I don't know. That's what I call moving the goalposts. Let's go to some logical fallacies here. United States, a rogue involvement of the 13 British North American colonies is only one country in the Americas. It should not be called America solely. Correct. It's not. It's not America solely. It isn't. Thank you so much for that. So hopefully, and I want to thank the sister for sharing her thoughts respectfully, you know what I'm saying? But in discussion, we're able to see and begin to, that's what we're seeing. I'll keep saying, a moving of the goalposts, creating new logical fallacies that help to justify certain thought processes. This whole conversation of holding your own nuts, and we were already here, and you just came, and you don't have a right to it. That is what had me like, what? So now it's like we're not saying that anymore, but that's what you're saying. So let me get the hold your own nuts discussion, because I had to look that up, and I have a brother here. Hold on, let me see if I can play you a little bit of the hold your own nuts discussion. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to share. And I'm going to keep on finding some stuff because I have some more questions that I didn't come back with. Like, were they here in the Raw Harlem Renaissance? I'm going to let you know, yes. Were they here during civil rights? I'm going to let you know, yes. Did they fight? Did many fight? The answer, again, is yes. And we'll come back and talk about that. Let me see here. Let me get the hold your own nuts discussion here. One second. Here we go. This one was done by, and he has a lot of videos concerning the matter. It's never really shown. Okay. B Miles. With another video from the B Miles 84 Conscious channel. I know it's early in the morning, but I wanted to come to y'all. Your man been a little busy lately. But of course, yeah, y'all been wanting to make this video for quite some time, but now I gotta make it. And this is actually gonna be right here a message to Black immigrants. And I was supposed to make this video for real about towards some Black immigrants. You know what I mean? People coming from all over, like the diaspora, Central and South America, even places like Africa, and all these other places, right? You know what I mean? Where there's a high concentration of melanated people. But I want to send this to you Black immigrants and all that. You feel me? It's when it comes to the time you gotta hold your own nuts. Why? Because I really get sick and tired of y'all keep coming over here, man. You know what I mean? Y'all keep coming over here looking down on us. Or, you know what I mean? It seems like to me that y'all got some sort of gripe towards the so-called African American for real. You feel me? And it seems to me, no matter how hard we try, you know what I mean, to like extend our hand, it seems like that these so-called Black immigrants, they always want to like keep their distance from us. Because see, every time we want to keep our distance from them, then they want to say we gotta love everybody. Well, then all of a sudden now that they want to pull out their Black card, or all of a sudden now they Black, but these are the same damn people. When they come over here, they talk about, well, I'm not Black, I'm so-and-so. I'm not Black, I'm not so-and-so. Dominicans are known for this shit, you know what I mean? Even some Puerto Ricans, a lot of Jamaicans, put it like this, and I'm gonna say a lot of y'all that come over here from Central and South America, even Africa, you come over this bitch and look down on us. And if you ask me, we are really sick and tired of this shit, of us extending our hand towards y'all. And then you want to turn around and you want to shit on us. We pop y'all up all the damn time. You know? We always pop y'all up, and every time when it comes down to our struggle, neither one of you guys want to participate in none of our struggles anyway. So what it seems to me, you know what I'm saying? Now, mind you, this is not... So, you know what I mean, to my Black Caribbean family and my Black Latino family. I'm not talking about to those of y'all who really identify. I'm only talking about to those of them who don't. Because see, a lot of y'all come over here and they come over here with the same type of mindset. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? When they come down, you know what I mean? When they come to these white immigrants, they want to talk about we lazy, we cotton pickers. They want to talk about, you know what I mean? All you guys, you know what I mean, don't want to stick together, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's true. Now, some of us want to stick together, but when it comes down to us as a whole, you know what I mean? Even when it comes down to a lot of you Black immigrants, you feel me? And when at the same time I put it out there to y'all, all the damn time that we the same people. All right, you can go listen to more of that. That was an interesting discussion. Please excuse the profanity, as I don't usually play that or participate in levels of profanity on the channel. There were many things. That's why I said this is coming from a space of trauma and rejection and things that have happened, conversations that has been passed down, and this is not one-sided. This is not one-sided. King Ross says ADOS and CARICOM are fighting for the same thing. So why aren't you just on code with the new movement and do the history lesson after we win something? See, and that's very interesting. What is this on code conversation? There's the code, because what it sounds like is, for what I'm experiencing and hearing, is that let us scapegoat or jump on the backs of others and say that they are the ones that are holding us back and sever ourselves from them. And then when we get what we're looking for, then it will be all good. Like, how does that make it make sense? You see what I'm saying? The history lesson is what you're fighting for. In order to say you qualify, one has to go do a history lesson. One has to go into the genealogy. One has to go into the records. One has to go into the archives. That's history, because you're looking to be redeemed, or you're looking to have reparations for injury that was done in the past. And it starts way, way back past. So that's, that is a history lesson. You know what I'm saying? So why am I doing this? Because we have to stand on truth, whatever we do. If we stand on falsehood, it's going to crumble each and every time. We have to stand on truth. Baruti says Africans in the Americas descending via transatlantic slave trade, i.e. Cuba, SE, US, Brazil, are kin by blood and geo-origin, i.e. Mozambique area, Triangle Node, region of Senegambia, Congo. And these are brothers and sisters on the same side, as you're saying, the same sides of the water. These were people who were split up, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, fathers and daughters, one left in the Caribbean, the other one taken to the Americas. That's history. So you're saying, okay, the person went over here and they were extremely abused. I want compensation for that abuse, right? And CARICOM, like you're saying, CARICOM is doing the same thing. Is CARICOM doing what ADOS is doing? These are questions that we have to ask. How is it being played out? Because this conversation is not only coming with anger and vitriol in some places, honestly, to those who you feel owe you something, like the oppressor. It is also actually turned and you Black immigrants, and I don't even like that term, so-called Black immigrants. It's actually turned now, and the indifference and the resentment that has built up is now being spewed on others, because the association is that they're taking my money, or they're eating out of my trough. I heard that somewhere before. Or they're trying to get my bag. And they're the reason that I can't get ahead. Is that honest? Is that true? That they're the reason that you can't get ahead or haven't been able to get ahead? And that they never came and fought for the cause? Is that true? Because if it's not, then we need the history lesson now. Because what's happening is that people are causing damage. When people are all throughout these social media streets, and as people call it, they're actually damaging, and by furthering this lie and not specifying who you're talking about or what you're referring to. It's gonna, at the back end, there's a saying that says, why cut your nose to spoil your face? And that's what it appears is being done. There's a short-term gain, but a long-term loss. Because behind it is this feeling of being rejected and being looked down upon. Mainland continental melanated people don't just look down on people from mainland continent America. I'm here to tell you, I've been to Africa. I lived in Africa. I'm not just talking out of the side of my neck and talking what I don't know. Some people say, why don't I've been there? I would go back again. But I've lived there amongst them in their natural setting, not as a tourist in the hotel, but actually amongst them, and being able to experience in general how people relate to someone who they feel is not them. To a certain degree, this is a part, this is some of it is the trauma, and some of it is just human behavior. And real life discussions need to be had, because it's not just one side. I'll say this to what I found out in some of the research. I found out that after the Civil War, you had America. This could be where some of this is where some of the indifference could come from. You had, first of all, before that, you had America going throughout the Caribbean and recruiting hundreds of thousands of men to work in Panama on the Panama Canal. So they brought them on, and you can look that up, to how many people America recruited. 90,000 of them was from Jamaica to work on the Panama Canal. So the Caribbean population was well aware that in some spaces, America had gainful employment for them because they came for them. In another space, when independent farmers or plantation owners wanted what you call temporary people to come in and harvest crops, they brought people in from the Caribbean. Like, that's history, that's record, to come and work in the fields. And then they would go back in the Caribbean. This was 1800s. They were called, I'll tell you what they was called. They was called swallow migrants. Let me look it up for you. So this thought of why are they calling us here? Again, history can help to heal. Why are they calling us here when you have mainland continental people here? But yet still, the American so-called government was bringing in other people, kind of like how they're bringing in Mexicans in certain respects to work in the farms. They've been doing that. And sometimes they were going to the Caribbean to do it. So this is not the first time after migration, after slavery, that you see Caribbean so-called bodies on the mainland continent interfacing with those who were here in a different state. You had when Haiti opened up and a large majority of Haitians came into Louisiana, they didn't come as slaves. Let me see. Sister Israel, this ADOS nonsense proved their hypocrisy. Funny, they seem to fight Africans as a new phenomenon. Where were they the last 60 years? Funny how social media hashtags stunk the mind. Hey, Shalom, what's time? Yeah, this is what we're trying to not allow ourselves to like be pulled into, like just social media movements that are not educating. So for King Ra, who's like, well, why are you doing a history lesson? We need to be educated because we out here making ourselves look like, seriously? You see what I'm saying? Like, seriously? Like, someone asked me about, and it might have been a genuine question. So I'm like, all right, let's go look. Let's go look about the Harlem Renaissance. Let's go look at that 1/3 of the population who was in Harlem. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna pull it now. Let me see if I have it. 1/3 of the population. Since you talk about a history lesson, let's get in this history. ADOS wants to be the quote American and are fighting for the psychosocial acceptance, metaphorically, that represent the long era loyal U.S. plantation slaves who are aggrieved to see new slaves get crumbs. Yeah, this is a question about what is this about, Baruti. I agree. What is this really about? You know, I read before. Let me pull it. I said I was going to go to Harlem. Now we need to be organized and strategic. Yeah, I agree. We need to be organized, strategic, and honest. Honesty, man. We need to be honest. Hold on one second. Hold on. 1 second. I just pulled that book the other day. Hold on. There's some, oh, here it is. No. There's something I wanted to share. Okay. I think it's in this book. This book is called 30 Years a Slave. This book is called 30 Years a Slave, right? By Lewis Hughes. Okay. Like I said, I interviewed on this channel the young man who did the homework and the backstory and was able to trace his ancestors to this particular Lewis Hughes. There's actually 2 of them in the Library of Congress. There was another Hughes that was there that left the information on record. But this particular Lewis Hughes, he wrote The Institution of Slavery as Seen on the Plantation and in the Home of Planter is his autobiography. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what he observed in the way in which the slaves, enslaved individuals, engaged one another and how they viewed one another even then concerning Baruti's comment, right? Hold on, let me get it here. I know I highlighted it. Okay, here we go. On page 45, it says this, the new style of living. It says the servants at first were dazed with the splendor of the new house and laughed and chuckled to themselves a good deal about Master's fine house and really seemed pleased. For strange to say, the slaves of rich people always rejoiced in that fact. This is history. This is his observation that if you were a slave of a rich person and you were like Malcolm X was saying, we sick master, we's well, this was real. So this is his observation. He says a servant owned by a man in moderate circumstances was hooted at by rich men's slaves. So the slave was acting as though it was his money, right? His wealth. And he was scoffing at his fellow enslaved individuals' plight because their master wasn't rich. Very interesting how this status of who has more money and who is closer to the person with more money. And I've said it before, it's kind of like today, if you work at a prestigious law firm or you work on Wall Street and the other person says they work at McDonald's, one is lauded, even though they don't own Wall Street, and the other one is demeaned because they work a menial job. It's the same thing. Your slave master was your employer. You just didn't get paid, right? It says it was common for them, meaning enslaved individuals, to say, oh, don't mind that darky. He belongs to poor white trash. So as I said, our slaves rejoice in master's good luck. Each of the women wore a new gay colored turban, which was tied differently from that of the ordinary servant in some fancy knot. So even though I'm not able to get it, I want to be, this is what he's saying, the mentality was, I want to be like Massa. And the closer I am to Massa, the more of importance I am at the expense of your brothers and sisters. Think about that. At the expense of your brothers and sisters, it's the closer you are to the money or to the bag or to the master, this gives you value. And you will even dog. So we're here talking about how the Caribbean or mainland our continent is talking about those who had been enslaved here on the mainland. But there's plenty of evidence. This is just a little bit of evidence. There's plenty of evidence how this very thing that one is complaining about existed right here. If you had a poor master and one had a rich master, the one with the rich master was dogging you out. The leaders of ADOS want to be normalized into whiteness, their own words. Funny, this whiteness is what enslaved Africans fought and struggled to escape. That's interesting. I think Black folks are afraid of white folks essentially, so we mask our fear in this pseudo-intellectual babble just so we don't have to face white power structure. That's interesting assertion. What part of it is pseudo-intellectual? Is it the reading of the history? What part of it is pseudo-intellectual? Because all I've been doing is sharing the history. So I'm not sure what part of the aversion to history and reading hearing it was bad, it was really bad. I'm like, there's no way possible. You know what I'm saying? That's the fullness of the narrative. And when you begin to read into your ancestors, who we say, many people, whether you're from the Caribbean, whether you're from South America, whether you're from the mainland, if you say you want to be compensated for their plight, I will bring up CARICOM. Like I said, I have a long list of things to talk about. I'm actually in the middle of watching, and I actually shared it. Go ahead and look at the community board, King Rock. I actually shared this long list of CARICOM information so that I can know what CARICOM has been doing. You see what I'm saying? But CARICOM is fighting this fight in a different space. CARICOM is not on social media defacing and defaming people. So because ADOS is doing this in a social media setting and they're sending out people to deface and defame people, CARICOM is into international spaces putting forth their claim, which is very different from what we're seeing now. So my address to what's happening now is based on what we're seeing now. But like I said, I'm still looking over the strides that CARICOM is making and the things that they have been doing. So like, again, my thing is not about trying to get anybody's bag. You know what I mean? I don't think we're understanding what this is about, for me at least. He says post-traumatic slave syndrome, we get it. No, we don't. I don't think we do. We don't get it. We don't get that. I don't think we get it. So let's have a big cry, build a bridge, and get in compliance. See, this is the get over it. How do you get over it? This is the same thing that someone else said. Let's get over it. How do we get over it when we're not able to honestly address it? When we're not able to come to the table and be transparent with one another? When we want to scapegoat each other and pretend that what we're saying is facts when it's not really facts. So stay tuned for CARICOM. You know what I'm saying? Stay tuned. For practical purposes, dispersed Africans via slave trade and those of African soil can generally be classified as Bantu. Term can unify Africans today. I've heard that, and somebody correct me. I've heard many say they don't want to be classified as Africans. They don't want to have any connection with the continent. The continent didn't reach out. The continent is not accepting. You can't repatriate and become part of the continent. And for this reason, then you have to kind of accept your fate and your own designation and make a new tribe, so to say. You know what I'm saying? And just accept the reality of where you've been. So everyone has the opportunity and the right to choose what they want to do. You know what I'm saying? I would say that people have the right to say, listen, I don't want to do that. And that's well within their rights to do. But all I'm saying, if we want to talk about mutual respect, then we have to have it on all sides. We can't expect it and not be willing to give it. There was one other thing I wanted to share. There's one thing I wanted to share, and I forgot now. I'm gonna come back more and talk about swallow migrants, because I'm gonna keep talking about it. I'm gonna keep talking about it. I'm gonna put all this information out there, and then you do with it as you see fit. You know what I mean? But I'm gonna keep talking about it. The Harlem Renaissance, I think I gave a little bit of information that definitely Caribbean people were there. They so-called Caribbean people, they did come, they did fight, they did contribute. So it is also in the civil rights. And you do have some people on both sides of the conversation who look at one another indifferently. One looks at, you're coming to take my spot and I don't even have enough food up for my own. And the other one looks like, yeah, you're leaving food on the table, so I'm coming to eat. And really the contention and the indifference was with those who have enslaved you. You know what I'm saying? But we can't sit here and pretend that it's only one-sided, as we heard in the video. So any more questions and comments, feel free to share. Feel free to share. Let me see. I can't remember if they took him from the continent. No, he was born in Virginia. Yeah, he was born in Virginia. Any more questions or comments? Feel free to ask or share your thoughts. I guess I'll just share this last one that I wanted to share. I think it's in the box. And then I'll call it a day. This is African Americans in the Revolutionary War. It's talking about the British who declared that they would liberate the enslaved individuals who fought for them. Those soldiers were called Black loyalists. And about, they said this at this time it was about 200 black loyalist soldiers assisted the British in successfully defeating Savannah against a joint French and rebel American attack. And then there was a proclamation. So I'll read that. Lord Dunbar, the royal governor of Virginia, was determined to maintain British rule in the southern colonies and promised to free those slaves of rebel owners who fought for him. On November 7th, 1775, he issued a proclamation. I do hereby further declare all indentured servants, Negroes, or others appertaining to rebels free. How did they have the right to do that? Because Britain is still, the British are still in control of America, right? And America is trying to, the rebels are trying to break away from the yoke of their parents, essentially. And so they had the right to still liberate the slaves. It says, that are able and willing to bear arms, they joining His Majesty's troops by December 1775. The British Army had 300 slaves wearing a military uniform. Sewn on the breast of the uniform was the inscription, quote, "Liberty to slaves," end quote. These slaves were designated as Lord Dunbar's Ethiopian Regiment. Okay, and that goes on to say, so they fought, and then it goes on to say, the fate of the Black loyalists. On July 21st, 1781, as the final British ship left Savannah, more than 5,000. That's a considerable number. We see 750 something went to Trinidad after the previous war. And now this war, some 5,000, more than 5,000 enslaved African Americans were transported with their loyalist masters for Jamaica, or St. Augustine. And 300, St. Augustine is Trinidad. So they either went to Jamaica or Trinidad. And about 300 Blacks in Savannah did not evacuate, fearing that they would be enslaved. So I don't know if I could trust this dude. He's going to take us here. It says they established a colony in the swamps of the Swanee River. By 1786, many were back in bondage. So they feared that they would be back in bondage. They didn't leave, and they got re-enslaved. The British evacuation of Charleston in December 1782 included many loyalists and, again, more than 5,000 Blacks, so-called. More than half of these were slaves held by the loyalists. They were taken by their masters for resettlement in the West Indies, where the loyalists started or bought plantations. So if they come back here and saying that they are the descendants of the Black loyalists who fought in the war, are they an American descendant of slave? I'm messing with y'all. The British also settled free slaves in Jamaica and other West Indian islands, eventually granting them another 500 slaves were taken to East Florida, which remained under British control. And this is the movie I'm currently rewatching. The British promised freedom to slaves who left rebels to side with the British. In New York, which the British occupied, thousands of refugee slaves had migrated there to gain freedom. They created a registry of escaped slaves called the Book of Negroes. It goes on to say, by the time the Book of Negroes was closed, it had names of 1,336 men, 914 women, 750 children, who were resettled in Nova Scotia, which is in Canada. So we have over 5,000, let's see, 5,000 more than plus 100, so 6,336 with another 900, yeah, 7,000, about 8,000 people, if I'm not mistaken. Leaves from here, fought, died, ancestors buried, and they went to another place. But they will still be a descendant of slaves who fought in the Americas. And that's just a article. We have the Bantu Speaking Heritage of the United States, 1974, is a great book which documents the ethno-linguistic heritage of the U.S. African tapestry. Bantu Speaking Heritage. Okay. Imuna, what are your reaction to the term Bantu, given that it represents the linguistic classification for most African language? How do you conceptualize the term? I would have to look into it. I mean, I've heard it in passing. I really haven't done much research on it. I would say, like I like to say, I have to reserve my thoughts until I learn a little bit more about it. I want to thank you, that's Baruti. Thank you for asking. I would say I have to look into more about it because I'm not really familiar with much of what you're presenting. So I'm good on saying I don't know when I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Or saying I'm gonna go check it out when I need to go check it out. And if we have that level of humility one to another, then there'll be less misinformation or disinformation. So definitely we can have a discussion about that and how it relates and correlates to what we're talking about, and whether it's the answer or is there something else that's going on beneath the surface, you know? I think there's definitely something going on a soul level. That's just my observation. Like I said, resentment, indifference, just being tired. Many people are tired of the go round, tired of being, given the short end of the stick, and it's understandable. That is definitely understandable. The plight here on the mainland continent has been and continues to be real. No one is taking that away. No one is saying that that's not a reality. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying at all. So to acknowledge one another's pain, I will give you guys an organization. Let me look it up. If you do want to talk about issues like this, what's the name of them again? I think their name is, oh man, come on. I think the name is like Community Healing Network or something like that. Hold on, I'm gonna tell you right now. They have spaces, they have programs that are talking about reparations in this area, Healing Network, I think the name of it. So on. Where you can come in and you can sit around. Yep, Community Healing Network, Inc. So if you go to their website, let me get the website for you guys. If you want to have these discussions, if you want to work through certain things and you're looking for places to go, I have looked at this site in times past. Community Healing Network. Maya Angelou was affiliated with it before she passed. And it's talking about, let me give y'all a virtual tour before I go, shall we? I like to show and tell. Okay. Here it is. This is the site I'm talking about. It's called Community Healing Network. Someone told a lie one day. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Martin Luther King Jr. So we're talking about people who are telling lies and what has happened. They have 2019, the year we cleared the way for Black children to flourish. This is Community Healing Network. I believe they're out of, I think they're out of Connecticut. Let me go back and look if I remember correctly. I believe so. Yep, they're out of New Haven, Connecticut. It's funny because I used to live in Connecticut and I didn't know about them until I know exactly where they are, to Whaley Avenue. So you have emotional emancipation circles where you can sit down and talk out your issues, your real-time problems, what's going on. It says emotional emancipation circles are evidence-informed, psychologically sound, and culturally grounded self-help support groups designed to help heal the trauma caused by anti-Black racism in EECs. We share stories, deepen our understanding of the impact of historical forces on our self-worth, our relationships, and our communities, and learn essential emotional wellness skills to help us be at our best as individuals and as people. So I say I do this for real, for real. I learned about them many years ago. It talks about how you can start circles, how you can become facilitators. Currently, they have trainers in Los Angeles, California, and New Haven, Connecticut. You can be trained to begin to have these discussions. They've trained more than 500 emotionally centered circle facilitators in over 40 cities. So this is something, if we're talking about real time, what can happen, they have some in the Caribbean, in the UK, in the United States, New Haven, Los Angeles, Ferguson, Oklahoma, Baltimore, Sacramento, Washington, Tuskegee, New Orleans, and Denver. So if you're interested in being proactive in your community and you want training and you want understanding of how to do it in real time, check out this website. I'm gonna put it in the box. and they collaborate with others as well. So that's my contribution, y'all. Each one help one, each one teach one. We have to get off the computer in many instances and get into real time and affect real lives and inform ourselves so that we can have an opportunity to change the narrative. I'll put the link here and then I'll put the link in the box. Bantu or some variation means people of human beings in many African languages. Tonight's discussion and analysis were excellent. Thanks for providing an insightful venue. Thank you so much for coming by. Continue to join us. Feel free to leave your comments in the box, your suggestions in the box. We're going to come back again at another time and talk about trauma bonding. Yeah, last night's discussion, was it last night? Went pretty well, where we're talking about sexual and child abuse and incest. So now we're going to go into trauma bond and we're going to pick another one of the points. And then we're going to go into that and show the correlation of the fact that that actually happened as well in the chattel slavery and enslavement experience in the Americas. So with that said, thank everybody for tuning in. Everybody have a blessed night. All right, one love, y'all.